Well. Welcome everybody to the daily roundup. Believe it or not, I'm Daria Humphrey, who's actually the host today. My good friend and colleague, David the Menzoid Menzies, is off in Israel. I was supposed to go. Some of you may be wondering. I had a family emergency that required me to stay home. So I'm here from home hosting the show with my amazing co-host, who is Cindy. Oh my gosh, I said it wrong. See, I'm already messing up the job. Cindy Bizard out from Alberta. How are you doing this morning?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's a pleasure to be joining you. And I should say, actually, I know that we made a re-releasing or a more public release of your recent documentary on Kamloops. So I'm glad to see that that's being aired more broadly. And it's great to be joining you. I see you got some of that awesome Rebel merchandise going. But otherwise, it's great to be joining you. How are you doing today?
Yeah, you threw two really good things. That's right. We have a video coming out today to explain that there is the free release now of the truth behind the claim in 2021 that there had been 215 children found buried or buried children at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. So if you go to Kamloops, The Buried Truth, you can find that. And I have a video coming out to announce that. And you're right. So guess what? We have some girly colors at the Rebel News Store. So if you go to rebelnewsstore.com, I love it. It's pink. And I have a shirt too that says Rebel with a cause. It was already my favorite. And now it comes in pink and other colors. So definitely check that out. You can use coupon code Drea10. Or if you like Sydney better, you can use coupon code. Is it Sydney10?
I
Do
think
you have a
it's Sid
code?
10, I believe. It's been a while. I got to refresh
Sid10.
myself. Yeah.
Okay, probably sit 10 would make more sense. But yeah, we have really good colors on our merchandise. So I'm so happy and I'm loving this one. Let me know in the comments what you think. But in the spirit of our usual host at the Daily Roundup, David Menzies, I did Google what national day it is today. And it is Ice Cream and Coffee Day or Coffee and Ice Cream Day. So, Sid, which would you prefer? You're ice cream guy or coffee guy?
I've already had my coffee today. I think I have a winner in that department there. What about yourself?
I've I've had no coffee, not a big coffee drinker. I like tea and I like ice cream the best. So I'm definitely an ice cream person. Let us know in the comments whether you are a coffee or ice cream kind of person or the Italian, delicious Italian dessert that combines both. And that brings me to my next point on the daily roundup. You can actually comment and be a part of the show with us. We go over the hot press with you and it's unscripted, it's live. And like I said, you can be a part of it by going to Rumble or Odyssey on those free speech platforms. If you do a donation and do like a Rumble rant on there in a chat, we do our best to read all of those, make you part of the show. You can give us tips or weigh in on what we're talking about, like whether or not you like my new sweater. Oh, yeah. Okay, so trigger warning. We're getting into the first headline, and you will see Chrystia Freeland's face. So I like to give trigger warnings for both Trudeau and her because I'm sensitive to the emotions that they can evoke. But basically, we're going to start off with a clip of her saying how much she wants you to believe that the government understands what you're going through right now.
When it comes to interest rates and their impact on Canadians, I think it's important for Canadians to know that their government understands what they're going through. And yesterday, I spent the day doing my job as a constituency MP. I spent the day in my constituency office. I talked to students. I talked to the leaders of my riding's BIAs. And what I heard from them in very direct personal stories was the impact that high interest rates are having on Canadians. It's important in our parliamentary democracy for people, Canadians, to know that they can have those kinds of conversations with their MPs, that they can have those kinds of conversations with their finance minister. And it's important for them to know that their finance minister hears them. And I absolutely do. And that's why I also said in my remarks just now that I believe our single greatest economic priority, certainly for me as finance minister, needs to be to use all the tools at my disposal to work hard with leaders at other levels of government, to do everything we can to create the economic conditions that will allow prices to stabilize and therefore will make it possible for interest rates to come down. I think that's where we are in the Canadian economy. We understand the pressures Canadians are facing, and we're there with them.
Well, I don't know if I buy it. She always has this long pause, and if you couldn't see her ears, it would be like, are you listening to something? She's like a download before she goes on with her, speech. And, on the one hand, they'll say that they recognize what we're going through. They're in the daycare to show how much they care about the everyday person who, can't have a nanny and has to have their child drop off there. And then on the other hand, they're saying like, yeah, and we're also going to, tax you up the what when it comes to climate change. Are you buying anything of what she said there, Sid?
No, all I can think of right now is her recommending during the economic crisis they created that you should get rid of your Disney Plus subscription. Yeah. That was her, grand advice that would save your family from starvation. And one thing I do remember still is a photo. I think Ezra, our boss here at Rebel News, of course, he tweeted about her shoes. There's a photo of her shoes, and they look like a regular pair of kids' shoes, but they're actually like $1,000. Oh, they're very expensive, high end. And this is the kind of attitude that they embrace. They want to look like they fit in with the lower clad, let's say, while they're actually spending exorbitant amounts on their own condition.
Yeah, I remember those shoes, and they weren't even nice at all. But, it's better than seeing their shoes right there. I shouldn't laugh, but it's better than seeing without her shoes, which I've seen before. She's not always so put together. But yeah, you're right. It's a lot of virtue signaling that they are us. They are united with us. But it also, like, she's so contradictory sometimes. Like, I'm glad that you brought up the whole cancel your Disney account, which that's probably why the babies are screaming at her in the background when she's talking. But it also, even with getting that speeding ticket after she told us that she only bikes around, she's, risking people's lives and speeding and things like that. So we're not buying it. Neither, I guess, is leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre. He's going after the Liberals. We have a video coming up here where he's explaining how the Justin Trudeau is trying to erase our culture by removing Canadian symbols. So let's take a look at this.
See the shadow of Roundup still there? It was deleted from the passport, along with the famous Vandus and countless other symbols of Canadiana, of which we are all so proud. Justin Trudeau, of course, would like us to erase our past and cancel our future and replace it with the dystopia that now exists in this country after 8 years of his government, where the cost of living is rising faster than at any time in modern memory. Work doesn't pay. Interest rates are rising faster than ever in monetary history. Housing costs have doubled. Crime, chaos, drugs and disorder are common in our streets. And what does he want to do about it? He wants to quadruple the carbon tax to 61 cents a liter. He does this while he jets around the world, while his environment minister goes to Beijing in China, the country that emits by far the highest greenhouse gases of any country on earth. He won't be wagging his finger at the leaders in that country. He's too busy wagging his fingers at single mothers back in Canada who have to buy groceries for their kids, or working class carpenters who need a pickup truck to do their jobs. And when they do their jobs, work doesn't pay. They earn an extra $1. With clawbacks and taxes, they can lose 80 cents of that dollar. We punish hard work in this country after 8 years of Trudeau. You don't bring it home. In fact, increasingly, Canadians do not have a home at all. Housing costs have doubled. Rent has doubled. Mortgage payments have doubled. The cost of a down payment needed to buy a home has doubled. It has been double trouble after 8 years of Justin Trudeau. The good news is, life was not like this in Canada before Justin Trudeau, and it won't be like this after.
Everybody cheering and clapping, but it is true. There have been so many changes that we've gone through for Canada, and I think we're going through so many things. He listed a lot of the things that the everyday people are suffering. The whole idea of buying out a home out here. If you're a young person where I live in the Vancouver area, like you can't even get a shack in Vancouver for anything affordable, even if you and somebody else have a good wage in the home. But I think that clip is just part of many that we're probably going to see from the Conservative convention that's taking place. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's taking place in Quebec. So we have some reports coming from the lovely Alexa on that as well. But I don't know, would the next leader that gets in, if we do have a next leader, they kind of have a lot of cleaning up to do. I don't know, like I wouldn't envy that position. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, and I mentioned that previously. As soon as Pierre Poilievre enters into office, let's say, assuming he wins the prime minister position, all he has to do is clean up Justin Trudeau's act over the last few years. It's actually very simple. He doesn't have to come up with anything new. He just has to undo a lot of the things that have been implemented. And you mentioned a shack, and the cost of housing. And it, in contrast to this, we have another leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, and he calls this all an act. And it's interesting to see them squabble like this. And it's funny coming from Jagmeet, considering his rhetoric towards the Freedom Convoy movement, while at the same time his brother was donating to that same movement. So I don't know, maybe we can pull up that clip and decide who's who in the jungle here.
See, for Pierre, it's all an act. He pretends to care, but he doesn't know how regular people live. He thinks if you live in a normal home, instead of a government-funded mansion like him, it's a shack. Pierre Poilievre has had government-funded dental care for almost all his adult life, but he wants to take it away from kids and their families who are just now able to get their teeth fixed.
Always
That's
the
not the kind of respect that working people deserve. Pierre Poilievre doesn't want to help. He just wants power. And he will use that power the same way Conservatives have always used their power, to make them richer and to take away every bit of dignity from hardworking Canadians.
He's hiding his Rolex under his sleeve there. I mean, yeah, it is interesting to see them take shots at each other. And I'm not going to say that, politicians don't put on an act, but I will say when it comes to Pierre Poilievre, if he is doing an act, he's been pretty consistent with that act over time. We've seen Trudeau go back and say the opposite of what he says today versus what he just said, a couple of years ago during the lockdown. But Pierre has, been a politician for years. We saw even with when he was a finance minister, the sort of common sense approach that he took anytime he was challenged. And I see that he's continuing that through the campaign. So at the very least, he's consistent over the years. And again, Jagmeet Singh with the Rolex, I remember he dressed down in a video, and I think he was, throwing shade at Poilievre in that video too, and Trudeau. And he was wearing like a casual polo, and he still had the Rolex, and everybody called him out for that. But he also wears the $2,000 suits. He's not living in a shack out here in Burnaby, BC, or wherever he lives near me. But yeah.
Yeah, no, he's certainly living pretty lavishly, I imagine. But let's not forget, he talks about all the power Pierre wants. Well, what did Jagmeet do with his power as the leader of the federal NDP? He gave it to Justin Trudeau. He basically abandoned the voters of his own party and gave the seats of power that he created in some senses to Justin Trudeau, and they've been ruling with an iron fist because of that for a period of time. Now, obviously, there's tensions there and divisions that have been created amongst Jagmeet and the Liberals. Of course, they're not on the same side in some senses. But what do we see all this power talk and fighting about? It's just them trying to make other people look bad. How long has Jagmeet been talking about dental care, and what has he actually done at the end of the day? Has he a large portfolio of work and succeeding at the objectives he's laying on the table, or does he just like to talk about them?
I know, and dental care is important, but that was kind of one of the trade-offs for the political bromance you're mentioning there between how they've had the Liberals back the whole time. It was kind of like, if you give us the dental care so I can talk about it all the time and just throw to that to show like I'm some amazing leader if I was in charge, then we'll go ahead and scratch your back too. So I'm glad that you pointed that out for sure. Definitely, watching this stuff when you sit back, it does seem like a little bit like a play, but who will win at the end? I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments. I'm just checking to see if anybody has put a comment. In case you're just tuning in now, you can be a part of the show. You can do so by going to Rumble or Odyssey and doing a live chat, and we'll do our best to try to read the ones that are donations, because those help us keep this information coming out to the people. I think we'll go to an ad right now, and we'll be right back with more.
Canadians are grappling with news blackouts on social media due to the Justin Trudeau Liberal government's Bill C-18. This new piece of legislation demands that social media platforms pay the government for news shared by users, which is an inconceivable task for companies like Meta and Google. So, as a result, they have decided to preemptively block all Canadian news content, including ours at Rebel News. In response to this, we have since teamed up with VPN provider Private Internet Access to ensure that you can continue to access all of our content across a broad range of platforms while also maintaining your privacy. For only $2 a month, you can bypass Trudeau's new censorship laws while you safeguard freedom of speech and continue to get the news that matters to you the most. Visit piavpn.com/rebelnews to take advantage of the 84% discount and 4 months free. As a bonus, PIA has all of its servers located in the United States, not China, and they automatically delete user data from their servers to avoid leaks and government subpoenas for information phishing expeditions. Don't delay. Head over to piavpn.com/rebelnews to stay up to date on the news in Canada and protect your access to it. Don't delay. You don't want to be left behind.
And on that note, it kind of ties in with our next thing. But yes, I love that we have that sort of Noah's Ark solution for you guys to go ahead and get a secure VPN. And it does work out to $2 a day. Right now, there's a special we've combined or, we've collaborated with them. So it does work out to $2 a day. I think it's like an 83% discount just to be able to get the other side of the story from Rebel News and really just to know news in general. But that does bring us to our next bit of information, which is there's an article that came out from the Globe and Mail, and it's about what we've been trying to explain here. But I do know people are really confused about, who's the bad guy here, especially when you're going between Mark Zuckerberg and Trudeau. It's very confusing. But a lot of people are like, why is Facebook doing this? And what we've been trying to say is, well, the Liberal government is trying to find a way, basically, to pay more money to their state propaganda. That's the way I see it. And this confirms it. So if you look at this Globe and Mail article, it says the CBC stands to get the largest share of cash from online news act, experts say. So the Liberals will say this is just to help out Canadian news. Well, why would CBC, why would they get such a huge unproportional share of it? It says the CBC stands to receive the largest share of the $172 million the Federal Online News Act is forecast to pump into Canada's news sector, experts say, raising fears that the new legislation will make it harder for smaller news outlets to compete with the state-funded broadcaster. Oh, it's almost like it's been planned all along. What do you think, Sid?
Well, no, that's exactly it. Who should be surprised by this in the least? Oh, a government bill by Trudeau's government that is going to provide more money to the CBC. And if I'm not mistaken, how many millions, if not, I wouldn't say billions necessarily, but how many millions of dollars now has Justin Trudeau pumped into mainstream media outlets to keep them alive? And then what did we see recently? We saw that they were the very same outlets that were firing thousands of employees thereafter. It, in my opinion, is somehow a complete money grab when it's supposed to be the Online News Act for the good, for the betterment of people. But this is the same thing they do every single time. For everything they advocate, they're doing the exact opposite. at least in
Yeah.
the state of affairs we have in Canada under Trudeau's government. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Everything they say is the exact opposite of what they're trying to achieve.
Well, it seems like that. And you're right. You definitely argue a good case for about that. And I did point this out on a live stream before, but I think it's relevant. Like, kudos to whoever came up with this master plan to do this bill, because the Liberals already get a lot of flack for giving state media money. And let's face it, of course, we wouldn't take their money anyways, but it's not going to go to those who, really cover the news as it should when it comes to the Liberal Party. But one of the other things that I think that the Liberals can't ignore is how many people celebrate, cheer, stand up ovations when the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, says he will defund the CBC. So while you have, state media saying, give us more, we need more. And I think you were right when you said billions. I think it has been over $1 billion at least. Anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. But when you have such an applause for the leader of the opposition, when he says that, you have to come up, if you want to push propaganda on the people, you have to come up with another way to do so. So this is just sort of solidifying. I mean, that's getting close to 200 million that they would be receiving for that. So totally unfair. And of course, what is that going to do to the little guys? And you would think that some, if they're not grounded on, ethics when it comes to journalism, that it also persuades some to try to keep up with the CBC, like behave like the CBC when you're covering the news, avoid certain stories so that you can kind of fall into this category that, gets paid, and make sure you don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah, well, and it's something that should be noted is that they engage in the CBC, the state broadcaster, engages in a high level of embedded journalism, which might be redundant considering it's a government outlet. However, their proximity to the government agencies, to the RCMP, that access that they're granted because of their composure as the state media, also massages their journalists into some kind of complacency or a narrative that's being presented to them. Because if you go against the RCMP who's giving you this exclusive access, well, maybe they're not going to give you that exclusive access in the future. That's what they want, that exclusive access so they can share the details that are being provided to them without doing that real investigative work into finding out whether or not these things are true. How many headlines did they just roll with during the pandemic, and notably during the Freedom Convoy? The amount of maybe you can call it slander, I guess, or false accusations against the demonstrators, to say the least, across the country from these large outlets was at all-time highs when everyday Canadians were suffering and they weren't being heard. Yeah.
And where's the accountability? I mean, and speaking of the headlines during the convoy, you're absolutely right about that. But we're seeing more and more, or I'm noticing more and more, that headlines, it's like they're not even trying to hide it. You think you have this diversity amongst journalism, but you'll see the CTV, Global News, they'll put out literally almost the exact same headline, like within 24 hours of each other. I know I mentioned that when it came to the BC fires, in a report that I did, and I showed just a few of them, but it was literally the whole page full within 24 hours where they were all saying, oh, those who are skeptical about some of the origins of the fires are conspiracy theorists, even though that particular report was about BC authorities starting the fire that devastated some of the areas. I mean, people should be asking questions about this at the very least. And then another one that I saw recently was actually that sort of smear attack that we saw against Pierre, where they were saying that he's peddling far-right conspiracies. You saw that headline go across the board, state-funded media, state-preferred media. They all did the same story at the same time. I'm just hoping the everyday person who has a busy life and just wants to know what's going on, maybe they're not keeping up with all of the politics. I hope they're noticing this too, so that it triggers them to start looking at the news, with a more critical eye.
Well, and on top of that, I know right now we have people on the ground in Ottawa for the trial of Tamara Lich. And I understand that there is a police officer, and Chris Barber, there was a police officer who was telling the courts about the volatility of the demonstrations. Regardless of the subject matter there, I'm glad that we have our reporters on the ground doing real work on this file to tell people what's going on and to show them the other side. And then we have, I believe this is her walking in today, I believe. So we do have people on the ground. Yeah, in style. What do you make of all this?
Oh, well, first, I have to take a moment to talk about her walking in. Every time I see her walking in and out, it's exactly who she is. I got the opportunity to get to know her for a few days when she was out in BC for her book. If we can put the URL where you can find her tell-all book at the bottom, because I'm forgetting it. But man, does this woman have a lot of grace. And of course, she probably, I mean, we should have known that from organizing, but really when you're around her, and I see that as she's walking in and out of the courtroom, she has this grace about her. She has this calmness about her. She has this peace about her. I would be a mess in this situation. I mean, like I said, I was just with her a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know how she wasn't in a mess. This is such a strong woman, a strong Métis grandma that's going up, the Goliaths of the world, and with this false narrative where so many people think, I don't know, do they actually think she's a terrorist? But I love that, the clips you see if she walks in, it doesn't matter which reporter, whether it's our reporter with the boots on the ground or, some of the, state preferred journalists, there's a few of them, she answers with such love through her heart and grace, and she just glows. I don't know how she does it, but I got distracted because I just felt like that they needed to be said. But that's right. We are covering it just like we covered with the convoy. We are covering this like no other news outlet, hands down. Like you said, we have someone there with their boots on the ground all the time to show you what's up, of course, show you the other side of the story. There you see her walking there. She's got, I'm assuming, there's her lawyer. And then what is the URL? Sorry. Let's do the URL. Sid, do you know it? Where people can tune in for every step of the way of what's been happening with that trial so far.
You're going to have to pull that up on screen.
Whisper in my ear.
Hold the line.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I'm bad with the URLs.
Yeah, what was that, sir?
Okay, thank you, Olivia, the great Olivia. I promise they're not telling us what to say all the time. But she says she believes it's tamaratrial.com. And of course, you can also donate there to help the Democracy Fund cover the many legal fees that are involved in taking on this fight. We have a little bit of an article on this too. So let's see. I just got 1 second here. Here we go.
Well,
were you going to say something?
Oh,
hello?
wait, well, there we go. We have it up there.
There we go. Yeah, sorry about that awkward pause. We weren't actually frozen. We were just not saying anything. But CP24 News. And so their headline is that the Freedom Convoy got more volatile as protests went on. So a police officer is telling the courts this. So that's one of the latest things that came out there. So the claim is that it just got worse and worse and worse. I wasn't there. I said, goodbye to the trucks that were coming from BC. But from our great coverage that we did, I saw that it was like things were working out better as time went on. There was more organization. They were making sure that, of course, emergency vehicles could go through. They wanted to talk to the government. They eventually stopped the honking. What do you make of this claim coming out that it became more volatile as the days went on?
Well, I have to admit, and of course many of our viewers know, I wasn't actually in Ottawa. I didn't get to focus on Ottawa while it was happening because I was covering the events in Coutts. The Coutts blockade, of course, one of the many blockades that were taking place across the country in protest alongside the Freedom Convoy movement. So to suggest or to discuss whether the volatility in Ottawa was changing, I can't speak to. However, I can say that in the Coutts blockade, Milk River area, where these demonstrations were taking place in Alberta, it was quite literally unwaveringly peaceful. I know there's the headlines, there was arrest and charge, conspiracy guns, all that jazz. However, the demonstrations themselves, upon hearing the news that the RCMP had arrested and made seizure of weapons, they decided to end the demonstrations to unequivocally express that this was a peaceful movement. That was the vibe. Everyone packed up and left because they said, look, this is a peaceful movement. We're going to regroup and carry this on in other ways because we don't want people to think that violence is a part of this movement. That's how far they went. They ended their own demonstration before the Emergencies Act could bring down the hammer like they did in Ottawa. Which is unfortunate to say the least. But to suggest it was more volatile, I mean, perhaps the police actions were more volatile, especially given the last few days there, and you see all the violence that was brought on during the invocation of the Emergencies Act. I mean, they had private chats that were leaked at one point, the RCMP suggesting that they wanted to bring their boots on the ground. I forget the exact wording they used, but the rhetoric they were using against demonstrators was absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, you're right. I remember that video that got leaked when they were enjoying lunch. And if I'm not mistaken, that was pretty early on that they already had that attitude sort of going into it. And I'll just speak to some insider information I got during that time about what sort of training was happening to the police that were traveling from even places like British Columbia to go out there. Some of these police were they were new to the force, and they were really under the impression that they were like going to save Canada against these like horrible, dangerous people. And so they had to go through lessons and training about that, and then they get there and bouncy castles and hot tubs and feeding the homeless. I mean, that was definitely the other side of the story that wasn't told, but you can tell it's the main side of the story, because when they tried to complain about how dangerous and how much of a problem was it, that's what they had to stand on. I remember the mayor of Ottawa actually complaining about the bouncy castles and hot tubs. I mean, if this was such a danger to the people, that would be the last thing that you mention in a media interview about how bad the situation is. And of course, we saw that so many lies about what went down there. There was lies that there was, that the protesters started fires. And since then, we've reported it had nothing to do with the fires. So much of that. This officer, I mean, you said that it was peaceful. We showed many people that it was peaceful, especially for the size of that event. But it says, the officer says, as the days pass, he says there was more likely to be swarming from the demonstrators of the law enforcement. There was a lot of yelling and screaming at them. So, you know what? I have covered enough freedom protests to know that, there usually is someone who's yelling and screaming. There'll be hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, and you will have a couple people yelling and screaming, which I don't condone. But what is the context of this yelling and screaming? It's like you said, we saw and reported that over time, the law enforcement also, quite upped their stuff. Look what happened to our very own Alexa Lavoie getting shot point blank with that, was it tear gas canister, and hit with her baton. She's a journalist, for Pete's sake. I'm sure people were yelling and screaming at the officers when they saw that happen, or when they saw people getting trampled by their horses. But this was peaceful. So it's just another example of, the media just clinging on to whatever they can. It's that hot tub and that bouncy castle moment. They were loud and they yelled, and this proves that this was just, such a horrible thing for Canada.
Yeah. No, I can honestly say some of the best food I've ever had in my life was at the Coutts Blockade. The amount of love that they put into making that food, the environment was so warm and welcoming. It is quite literally the best food I've ever had. And that just shows you the spirit that people brought to that demonstration. I mean, they were literally on a highway and I'm talking specifically about the Coutts Blockade here. They were literally on a highway in the middle of nowhere. You could look across the horizon. You're not going to see another city or tall building anywhere. Negative 40 conditions, 30-kilometer winds. Yeah. It was atrocious weather. And yet there in the middle of all that was the most amazing dinner I ever had, and the most amazing people that you could have ever been around. It was an absolutely incredible environment, and I'm sure it was the exact same thing in Ottawa. And I know right now, of course, Pierre Poilievre, he was asked yesterday a question about the Freedom Convoy and about these legal proceedings that these two alleged organizers are going through. And I say alleged, I don't know, maybe that's more of a Coutts conversation, but maybe we can pull up this clip and talk about what Pierre has had to say about this recently.
Yeah.
Bonjour, M. Poilievre, Mathieu Boivin, Nouveau Info. S'ouvre cette semaine un procès pour les organisateurs du convoi de la liberté à Ottawa. Trouvez-vous qu'on leur fait un procès juste?
On verra, il n'y a pas eu un procès. Alors, je peux pas commenter un procès qui n'a pas eu lieu.
Est-ce que c'est juste comme procès de juger ce que ces gens-là ont fait?
Je comprends pas la question. Est-ce que le procès qui n'est pas arrivé déjà est juste? Je ne peux pas commenter quelque chose qui n'est pas arrivé.
I would have liked to seen more of an answer, but he does have a point. You can't say. The question was, do you think they will be given a fair trial? And so he's answering as though the question was, are they getting a fair trial? So there's a little bit of dance going on there. It reminds me of how long it took for Pierre Poilievre to finally be like, oh, I'm on the team truckers all of a sudden and be down there. So it reminds me of that when he gives these weak answers. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, kind of exactly that. It's a bit of a non-answer. It's a smarty pants answer, right? Oh, I can't comment on something that hasn't happened yet. He probably could have come up with something, at least, to say the least. However, one of the big issues, and I believe one of the reasons why it's worth asking the question that journalist asked him, do you think they're going to get a fair trial, is because we're seeing a lot of issues building up in the legal system here in Canada. One such is the issue of what is it with Justin Trudeau recently? The headline here we have is Ottawa taps Quebec judge to head foreign interference public inquiry. Now, I know there's a bit of a history here already into finding a decent person to lead these inquiries that isn't tied or connected to Trudeau in the first place, and for other inquiries that have been taking place as well, such as the public emergency inquiry, the public order emergency inquiry. So it's kind of sad to see. Yeah, no, exactly. And this new judge, I believe, she's part of the appeals court in Quebec, is my rough understanding here, and she actually previously worked for one of the same law firms that Trudeau's father had done some work for, I believe, in the past. There's a few things there that I think are a little suspicious, to say the least, even though I don't think that's, directly to say that there's a foul play at hand. Though it's interesting to see time and time again, there's some kind of discussion to be had about who these judges are that are leading these inquiries into the Prime Minister.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, really, I think we're going through so much, so many conflicts of interest as a country that it's literally hard to keep up with. It's almost like if you're in a bad toxic relationship and everybody else can see it, but you're so close to it, you're not really grasping what's going on. Because how many times do we have to see stuff like this happen? And then where is the accountability? Where is the consequence of it? I mean, the claim is here, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service said last fall that meddling by foreign countries didn't rise to the level of impacting the overall electoral integrity. So this is in that post that you're showing out here. So is that the standard of acceptance? Now we're just like, according to them, it didn't affect, a level of being able to actually shape the election. But what is the standard here? Like, there should be a zero tolerance on this issue. And that also goes when we need judges to do their jobs. And I think I'm just going to throw this. I don't know if you can pull it up this fast. And this is municipal, but I did reach out to the mayor and we haven't been able to have a schedule yet. But this interference that's happening in things like election or even in our public inquiries, or that would be more conflict of interest. But the mayor of Port Coquitlam, which is out here in BC, he's also saying that he became aware now that there was a campaign against him to try to get him out, that China ran their own candidate. So anyways, I will report on it. I was hoping to get an in-person interview on that, but I'm just saying there should be zero tolerance on these types of issues. And it's very concerning to see that we're seeing these patterns over and over. And what are we not finding out about?
Yeah, no, to say the least. And to touch on that, actually, in a few of the headlines, maybe we'll jump to an ad break first. But I think we're going to get into some of the authorizations that took place for the Pfizer vaccines in South Africa, I believe it is. Maybe we want to jump to a quick ad break first, and then we'll discuss that and some of the craziness that's coming out of one of our hospitals here in Ottawa.
How in the world could such a small group of people with limited resources change world history? But in fact, that's happening, and it's the power of the truth. The truth is like kryptonite.
Healthcare isn't in some sense working very well. Foster Colson is thinking about this. He's got a new company, an online healthcare platform called the Wellness Company.
Telehealth company called the Wellness Company.
The Wellness Company. The most popular product is the detoxification supplement that features nattokinase. Nattokinase is the only enzyme that we're aware of right now that dissolves the spike protein. Spike protein is loaded in the body with the COVID-19 infection and definitely with the vaccines. We've been completely accurate on the spread of the virus, early treatment, on the deficiencies in hospital care, and now the deaths that are occurring after vaccination. This is a human outrage, and it's occurring at the end of a hypodermic needle. Isn't it interesting? Natural substances combating this man-made disaster.
Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. I mean, I'm not surprised. Let us know in the comments. You can even live chat and donate, and we will read it. But the Ottawa Hospital in Ottawa, beginning September 11th, Here it comes. Masking will be required in all clinical areas and waiting rooms at the Ottawa Hospital. So first, I do want to know if you guys are shocked. I'm not shocked to hear about this. I'll read a little bit of the tweet. It says, as we prepare for the respiratory virus season, where we anticipate increased transmission of influenza, COVID-19, and RSV, the Ottawa Hospital will be updating some of our measures and supports to help protect patients. So my question is, how did we ever survive before out masking? I mean, these measures were supposed to be to get us out of the COVID pandemic. I mean, if you bought that. But now it's repeating. It's never ending. And I mean, that virus, COVID-19, most people have had it, whether they are vaccinated, boosted, up in the eyes, as Roseanne says, they're giving them the vaccine shot in their eyeballs, she says. People have had COVID. So when does it stop? And do you guys think, and Sid, this question's for you too, do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg and now we're going to see hospitals repeat it and then some?
I really hope we're not going to see a rinse and repeat of the COVID last few years that we've had to face. And we're going to touch on this shortly with Chrystia Freeland. I'll save that for a moment, but it really is just a rinse and repeat. And you look at this bringing back of the mask. Well, you know what? I want to cut to the chase here. I don't want to hear that they brought it back or not. I want to hear the reasoning, the very specific outlined details as to why they're bringing this back. What is the science behind this decision? Where are they getting their facts from? Who is the one making this decision? Who are the ones who are culpable in this decision-making process? Because there's going to come a time when they're going to seriously regret this, one may hope, and it needs to be traced back, and these people do need to be held to account for what they're doing right now. Especially, you look at the science behind everything and how fast the science changes. That's the one question I want to ask is, what are the details of this agreement or of this decision? Write it down on paper, and let's show it to everybody. Let's not just say, oh, we've made this nice decision here.
Yeah, like Jerry Maguire, show me the money, show me the data, show me the science, show me the logic. I always say logic was the first COVID-19 death. It just went out the window and everything followed. I also want to know, what will the people do? What will they do? I think it was Alexa did a report asking the people, will they comply if there's another lockdown and things like that. I'm actually going out to Vancouver today to ask the Vancouverites, will they, happily accept this masking stuff, this God forbid if we have, a vaccine mandate return. I'm seeing memes. I'm seeing a lot of people online saying, I will not do it again. I will not comply, or things like that. I don't know. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm buying it. I definitely think more people would not comply, but I think there will be a lot of people who will comply just because they think, everybody wants them to, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of people out there. That's why government messaging, that's why they spend so much money on government messaging and media propaganda, supporting these large outlets, is because they need to get that message across. Doesn't matter how true it is. If the government's handing you money to say it, you're probably going to take the money, as these mainstream media outlets are doing. And now they're propagating false information into the public. And what do? They say everything around them is a conspiracy theory. Everything around them is fake news. You science deniers, you racists because you don't believe in science and climate change. It is truly absurd. That's kind of my takeaway on that. And maybe I can pull up the clip now, or we can pull up the clip of Freeland and some of the talk that she said, because this is the same lines about the vaccine contracts she was asked about that were revealed in a legal matters in South Africa. They had to fully disclose these documents.
Subjects now for you, and just talk about the disclosure of vaccine contracts. The disclosure of vaccine contracts in South Africa. Contracts released show that vaccine manufacturers charged huge prices and required advance payments from the South African government, despite not knowing when they would even arrive. So all of this at the height of the pandemic. Will Canada release its vaccine contracts, and is it ethical for vaccine companies to be charging such large amounts during a time of a global pandemic?
Wow, really taking me back to the challenges of peak COVID. And I just want to start by reminding us all what a challenging, traumatic time that was. And I actually heard from some of the early learning and childcare educators here what a challenge it was for them, for the kids. and how some of the kids only now are getting through some of the trauma they endured because of COVID, some of the educational lags. It was a really, really tough time. And our government understood that we needed to do everything we could to get vaccines here for Canadians, because we understood that by getting vaccinated, we would be able to get through this pandemic more quickly, do things like lifting the lockdowns, which were so challenging for the people working here and for the kids working here. It was a really, really tough time. I am proud of how Canada came together in a Team Canada effort, and I'm proud of how hard we worked as a country that didn't have the capacity to produce its own vaccines to get the vaccines that Canadians urgently needed at that very, very challenging time.
So would you release the contracts?
As I said, it was an emergency. We acted urgently, and we got Canadians the vaccines they needed.
Wow, no transparency whatsoever. There is so much bothering me about this. Of course, the dancing around of the very important question. That was a good question that was asked, very concerning. But I want to talk about how wicked the excuse she used to dodge. She's pretending as though she had no clue until just that moment that children suffered. Of course, she says because of COVID-19, it was because of COVID mandates. We all know children, fared very well with COVID-19, the virus. So all of a sudden now, when she needs an excuse to dodge the question, she cares about the children. Where was she when we saw, I think I just shared a couple of articles, but it was very well published that there was child abuse up, that children were actually committing and trying to commit suicide at rapid rates because mandating isolation was a thing. And they weren't even, thank God, in British Columbia, kids could still do things like sports, but there were places where kids couldn't even do sports. They couldn't even see their peers smile, their teachers smile. That is a depressing state that is too much for children to have. She didn't care at all. Where was she? I think I sent another article here. Babies, infants were going to hospitals. They had fractures to their heads at a higher rate, which indicates more child abuse, of course, was going up. Parents were hurting their babies more. So these villains in power could care less at the time when these things are happening, when their voice could have mattered. Some of these mandates were, of course, provincial, but still someone like Chrystia Freeland would have made a big impact. And here she is using the trauma that was mandated on the children as an excuse to avoid this very important question. So I just wanted to drive that point home.
Yeah.
And what's your thoughts?
Maybe I can just... Yeah, no, it's absolutely surreal to see them talking like this. And this is one of the big lies that they engage in, is they say, oh, because of the coronavirus pandemic, you were suffering, but we made it through together. They don't say, oh, yeah, we implemented lockdowns that killed a countless number of people and ruined the lives of an untold number further. That was us, but don't blame us. Don't blame us for that, because we needed to do it because that's what we were told you wanted us to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's so bad. We have a tweet here from, I was so fired up there that I scrolled past it here. Lion at, am I skipping something? Sorry, guys.
Nope, that's right.
Nope. Yeah. So by Lion Advocacy. So Health Canada is in big trouble. Check out this disclaimer. Pfizer is what we were just hearing about. Pfizer got South Africa to sign some of Slovenia's, same as Canada's, undoubtedly. So long-term effects and efficacy not currently known. And again, I just want to interject. It was a bit ironic to ask, WEF's Freeze bank accounts queen, Chrystia Freeland, a question about ethics. But so adverse events not currently known. Health Canada knew and still misled Canadians. So, I mean, again, not surprising, but we're seeing the evidence trickle out about the trauma we've all lived through, thanks to the government here. And here highlighted in red, it says, for the purchaser acknowledgement of the vaccine to purchaser under this agreement, purchaser further acknowledges that the long-term effects and efficacy of the vaccine are not currently known, and that there may be adverse effects of the vaccine that are not currently known. So, I mean, We know this, but we're just seeing it on a larger scale. I mean, are we even allowed to talk about this stuff on YouTube? I don't know, but we have reported that all along, even though you were told the first shot's the best shot. And we've reported on what happened to some people from following that advice. And then, Pfizer was the prize one. And we know now, we've done many reports at Rebel News that they didn't even know if the thing works. Okay. And now we're still being told, I don't know, take your 800th booster. I don't even know what number people are on. So,
well, and maybe I can just add to that, regardless of the gentleman there, I believe, is currently making an assumption that this contract may be the same as the contract that was signed here in Canada. Could be, could not be, we don't know. But the fact of the matter is what this contract says, I think, poses highly relevant to us in Canada, regardless of whether that's true. This is a very dangerous precedent to set, and that's why Chrystia Freeland didn't answer that question whatsoever. Are you going to release the contracts? Well, I think we all did what we needed to do to make sure everyone was going to stay safe, and I'm proud of that decision. Thank you very much. I mean, that's not an answer. She's avoiding all liability here. And these people need to be held to account because these are secret contracts that they signed and they're not willing to review to the public.
Yeah, nothing should be secret from the people, especially when it's about something you're telling the people need to inject in themselves, have injected into their bodies. There should be zero secrets about something like that. This is so invasive. And we got to keep on this and the people, I don't know, maybe this is petition worthy. We need to see what's in those contracts. We deserve to see. Our tax dollars go to this, and it's our house on the line here.
Well, and so long as we're still playing it YouTube safe, I hope there's a surgeon that blasts Biden's new mRNA stuff here. Maybe we can pull that up if we're not going over the edge. But if perhaps we are, then I can just say it is a pretty sad state of affairs, and hopefully we can get some more information about these contracts that were signed by those who were the ones telling us the most that these were safe and effective.
I just got word from the wise Olivia, we actually are going to cut the YouTube stream so I can stop sweating about what I'm saying on here. But it gives you an opportunity to become a fan and a viewer on platforms where we don't have to self-censor. So if you go to Rumble and Odyssey right now, you can watch us there. I'm sure there's probably links in the description below, and you can